Beneath a dying street lamp, Carter sat with his younger brother, their bodies wrapped in a thin, torn blanket. The concrete was their throne, the night their enemy. Hunger gnawed at their silence, yet in that silence lived a secret. The foundation of an empire was being born in the dirt. Carter wasn't just a brother. He was a shield. The streets hardened him, but his younger brother softened the edges of his anger. By day, Carter searched trash bins and odd jobs for scraps, and by night he whispered dreams of palaces and warm meals. His brother, weaker in body but stronger in spirit, listened with tired eyes that still carried hope. He was Carter's reason to fight, the fragile heartbeat that reminded him he wasn't alone. The world walked past them like shadows, faces blank, hearts closed. To everyone else, they were invisible boys on the sidewalk. But between the two there was something unbreakable, a promise, silent but powerful, that as long as they had each other, survival was enough. They didn't need the world's recognition. They only needed their bond, and in that bond, the first spark of greatness quietly began to burn. Each morning began the same, Carter lowering his pride to stretch out an empty hand, hoping for a coin, a crumb, a glance of kindness. Most days he received nothing but silence. Strangers stepped around them as though they were stains on the pavement, their eyes fixed ahead, pretending not to see. The shame pressed heavier than the hunger. Beside him, his brother's cough echoed through the cold air, sharp and fragile like glass about to break. Carter would pull the thin blanket tighter, trying to shield him from a world that refused to care. His fists curled, not in anger at the passers-by, but at his own inability to change their fate. Each cough was a reminder of his failure, yet in that shame a fire grew. Carter didn't dream of pity. He dreamed of power, the kind that would one day make sure no one walked past them invisible again. On nights when the city grew quiet, Carter painted worlds with his words. He spoke of marble floors, golden chandeliers, and business towers that would carry their names. His voice trembled with both hunger and hope, but his eyes shone as if he could already see those palaces. His younger brother listened, curling deeper into the blanket, a soft laugh escaping his cracked lips. It wasn't a laugh of disbelief. It was his way of hiding the growl in his stomach, of pretending that dreams could fill the emptiness inside. But the world around them was never gentle. Passers-by overheard Carter's whispers and sneered. "Palaces? You can't even buy bread," one man muttered, tossing a coin to the ground as if mocking both their hunger and ambition. The words stung deeper than the cold, and Carter lowered his eyes. Yet his brother nudged him, whispering, "Don't stop, Carter. Keep dreaming." That simple push kept the fire alive. Even mocked in rags, Carter's dreams refused to die. If anything, every insult became another stone laid in the foundation of the empire he promised to build, an empire born not from privilege, but from hunger, humiliation, and the unshakable bond of two brothers. The rain hammered their shelter until the cardboard sagged, dripping cold water onto their thin blanket. Carter held his brother close, but nothing could keep the shivers away. The night felt endless, until a weak cough cut through the storm. With trembling fingers, his brother gripped Carter's hand. His eyes, fevered yet fierce, searched his brother's face. In a voice barely louder than the rain, he whispered, "Don't stop dreaming. Even if I can't see it, promise me you'll build it." Carter's chest tightened. He wanted to believe they'd rise together, to tell him they'd both see that future. But deep down, he felt the cruel truth pressing in. Tears blurred his vision, mixing with the rain. That night, Carter gave his vow, a promise carved not in comfort, but in storm and sorrow. The city washed them away, yet that vow remained unbreakable. The morning broke grey and cruel. Carter woke to the sound of his brother's breathing, shallow and broken, until suddenly it stopped being steady at all. His frail body collapsed onto the concrete, lips pale, chest struggling for air. Panic ripped through Carter as he shook him, shouting his name, screaming for help. Passers-by glanced, then turned away, their footsteps quickening as if tragedy was contagious. No one stopped. No one cared. Carter's cries echoed against the empty walls, swallowed by the city's indifference. He held his brother in his arms, rain-damp hair clinging to his forehead, knowing the fight was ending. In that silence, something inside Carter cracked open, not just grief but fury. The streets had stolen his brother, but they would not steal the promise. That morning, Carter's soul turned to fire, and from ashes of loss his vow grew sharper than ever before. Carter walked the streets alone now, but his brother's voice never left him. Those final words echoed like scripture, louder than the noise of the city, louder than his grief. Every step past crumbling walls and boarded windows became a vision. What if these forgotten places could hold life instead of dust? The idea struck not as a dream but as a duty. Abandoned buildings could become shelters, safe havens for the homeless who slept where he once had. He saw beds replacing cardboard, warmth instead of cold. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was a mission, a way to honor his brother's plea. Pain carved the blueprint. Hunger became the ink. Nights of silence turned into sketches in his mind. Carter knew he had nothing. No money, no power, no allies. But he carried something greater, a promise sealed in storm and loss. That promise would now become the foundation of his empire. Carter's days became a blur of sweat and grit. At dawn, he scrubbed dishes in greasy kitchens, his hands raw from soap and boiling water. By afternoon, he hauled bricks on construction sites, his back aching under the weight of stones heavier than his own grief. At night, when others returned home, Carter lay on cold warehouse floors, his body trembling from exhaustion, his stomach empty but his mind racing. Every coin he earned was guarded like treasure, not for himself, but for the vision that kept him alive. He skipped meals, patched torn shoes with tape, and slept fewer hours than the clocks dared to count. His body begged for rest, yet his spirit refused. In the silence of those nights, when the world around him slept, he still heard it, his brother's voice, soft but commanding, "Don't stop." And so he didn't. Each sacrifice, each sleepless night, became another brick in the invisible palace he was building. Their palace not for pride, but for a promise, one that no storm, no hunger, no betrayal could ever erase. The day came when Carter's endless labor finally took shape. With the coins he had saved and the scraps of courage left in him, he rented an old garage on the edge of the city. The place smelled of rust and oil, walls cracked, floor stained, but in Carter's eyes it was holy ground. He scrubbed it clean, patched holes with his bare hands. Hand scavenged discarded wood to build rough but sturdy beds. When 6 weary souls stepped inside that garage for the first time, their faces told the story. Men and women who had lived invisible on sidewalks now sat on mattresses instead of cardboard, under a roof instead of sky. Carter watched as one woman clutched the blanket to her face and wept, whispering that she hadn't slept in a bed for years. It wasn't wealth. There were no profits, no headlines. Yet in that moment, Carter felt richer than any man alive. For the first time, he had turned pain into shelter, grief into hope. Standing in that garage, he could almost feel his brother's hand on his shoulder, whispering, "See, you didn't stop. It wasn't money yet, but it was victory." The first true brick in the empire of a promise. Carter's garage shelter had lit a small flame of hope, and soon the city began to notice. Investors circled, offering promises of growth, speaking of multiplying his vision into something that could change lives on a larger scale. One partner especially seemed different. Steady handshake, steady eyes, words wrapped in loyalty. For the first time, Carter allowed himself to believe he wasn't fighting alone. Then came the blow. One morning, the savings he had bled for, every coin, every sleepless night, were gone. The partner vanished without a trace, leaving only betrayal in his wake. The account was empty, and so was Carter's trust. The sting wasn't just financial. It tore open the older wound, the memory of his brother's plea, the vow whispered in the rain. Betrayal now sat beside grief, daring Carter to break. But instead of collapsing, the fire inside him only burned hotter. The betrayal left Carter's foundation cracked, and soon the weight grew heavier. Bills stacked high, donations slowed, and the little garage that had once been a beacon now stood on the edge of shutting its doors. Whispers spread quickly, critics calling him naive, a dreamer chasing shadows. Some laughed, saying, "He'll be back on the streets soon enough." Each word pierced deeper, dragging him back to that stormy night when his brother had clutched his hand. The echo of that promise thundered louder than the doubt around him. To walk away now would mean erasing his brother's final plea, surrendering the only vow that had carried him through hunger, grief, and betrayal. Carter stood in the dim garage, staring at the beds he had built, and chose differently. If the world called him foolish, then he would be foolish with fire in his chest, because quitting was never an option. Carter refused to let the collapse bury him. With his pockets empty but his vow unbroken, he rose again, this time with a roar. He pitched his vision to anyone who would listen, his voice no longer soft or pleading but sharp, fierce, carved from nights of hunger and years of loss. Each rejection fueled him further. Each closed door only made him knock louder. And then one person finally listened. Not an investor chasing profit, but a believer who saw the fire in his eyes. They placed their trust and their money into Carter's hands. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to keep the lights on, to turn the garage into something greater. One shelter became two. Two became four. Each expansion felt like another stone laid on the road his brother had asked him to walk. With every bed filled, every life restored, Carter climbed higher. The empire of pain was becoming an empire of promise. Years passed, and the boy who once begged for bread now walked across polished marble floors. Carter's footsteps echoed through vast halls crowned with chandeliers that spilled golden light. Outside, towering gates guarded the palace that the world now called his home. To the city, he was a billionaire, a symbol of power and triumph. But inside those walls, Carter carried a different truth. In his private study, where silence reigned, a single photograph rested on his desk. Two brothers beneath a flickering street lamp, their bodies wrapped in a torn blanket, their eyes hollow yet bound by a dream. Carter would sit before it, sometimes for hours, tracing the edges of the photo with his hand. The palace didn't feel like victory. It felt like a vow fulfilled. Every chandelier above, every stone beneath his feet, every palace he owned was never truly his. They were monuments to a promise whispered in the rain. His brother's voice still lived there, echoing through marble halls. Don't stop dreaming. And Carter never did. The wealth, the power, the palaces, none of it was built for vanity. It was built for the bond that began on a sidewalk and burned into eternity. Carter's life was never just about wealth. It was about fire. Not the kind that warms, but the kind that is born in pain, sharpened in storms and carried through sleepless nights. From the sidewalk where hunger was his lullaby, to the palaces where chandeliers now light his path, one truth remained. Every empire begins with scars. His story is proof that greatness doesn't rise from comfort. It rises from collapse, from betrayal, from the nights you want to quit but don't. Palaces are not built with bricks alone. They are built with persistence, with promises kept, with wounds turned into weapons of strength. Carter's brother may not have lived to see the marble halls, but his voice lives in every wall Carter built. And now, the question turns to you. What will you create from your scars? What fire waits inside you, hidden beneath your pain? Fade to black. The words appear, subscribe, because your rise begins today, because Carter's fire was born on the streets. Yours may be waiting right where you stand.